Hello Moto Guzzi owners, this is a video I made a couple of years ago about how easy it is to inspect the flat tappets on an 8-valve motor. The problem is that this is something that seems to cause a lot of confusion. I just thought I would endeavour to show how quick and simple it is. I'm having to redo the audio on it because apparently there was some complaint made of the previous audio being subject to copyright because it had a radio playing in the background. Anyway, from here you can see the first thing to do is to remove the cylinder head cover and the spark plugs. Thing to do with this is be very careful with the spark plug leads. As you can see, I lever them off the plug through the cooling tunnel at the front. If you try and pull them off from the top, you will quite often find you will damage the plug cap, and this can cause problems later. Once the plug cap's out of the way, remove the head cover by removing the four bolts that hold it on and just lift it off. I'm hoping that most of this will be self-explanatory and I won't have to bore you with my wittering too much. Wind up the old Stone Age bench. May not be sophisticated, but it works. Next thing to do is to get this piston on this side up to top dead centre on the compression stroke. Prise out the cover over the front of the crankshaft. Grab yourself a 24mm socket and a 1/2-inch square drive and you can wind the crank over. By watching the valves you can turn it clockwise as viewed from the front, and you can see the inlet valves open and close, and then you can pull it around up and you will feel the piston coming up against compression. With a bit of practice you'll be able to feel when you get pretty much dead on top dead centre. That can be checked a little bit later on. Now what I'm doing here is in the back of the cylinder wall on the left hand side there is a small dome nut screw with a 4mm Allen head in it. You have to take that out because you are going to use that hole for inserting a small prong of some sort to hold the cam chain tensioner out of the way, so that the tension is off the cam chain. This makes it immeasurably easier to get the sprocket back on when you are putting it back together. Grab yourself a long thin screwdriver and push it down in between the blade of the tensioner and the cam chain itself, and then you have to start levering it to push the cam chain tensioner blade towards the left of the motorcycle. It does take a fair bit of effort. The tensioner plunger is made up of a telescopic device that is filled with oil, and what you're trying to do is actually bleed the oil out of it by compressing it. As you do so, you can insert your prong. Usually use something like a small Allen key, or even an old carburetor needle is something that I keep hanging around for it. You pull it through, it goes through the hole in the back of the barrel, through a hole in the blade of the cam chain tensioner, which you can't see obviously because it's down the tunnel, and into another hole in the wall of the cylinder itself, or the casting around the cylinder. And then when you remove the tension like so, you will feel the prong is held in place and the tensioner is relaxed away, or the chain is relaxed because the tensioner is held away from it. Next step, removing the cam cover plate on the back of the cylinder head. This is held on by two bolts. They changed the bolts a few times over the years. Usually they are simply 4mm Allen heads with a 5mm thread. On some of the later models they actually changed Torx fasteners for some reason. I've absolutely no idea why. Torx fasteners being much more troublesome, the best thing to do is to dump them and put on some Allen bolts. Now the plate itself is held in place with an O-ring. There are two different designs, but basically they're held in place with an O-ring. And it can be difficult to actually break the plate loose. So what you'll see me doing is get a big screwdriver and put it on one of the ears, give it a few bashes. Looks a bit brutal, but it's not. I'm only using my hand. It'll move around a bit, and then you can move it forward, move it out slightly. Once again, get your thin screwdriver and gently pry it, and it will come out. Don't try and hammer something in and pry it out. You'll damage it and it'll leak forever. Just take the breather hose and plate off, hang them out the way somewhere. You then need a 10mm deep socket and a ratchet to get onto the bolt in the end of the camshaft that holds the sprocket and flinger plate on. Bracing against the crank, you can then unwind that 10mm bolt in the middle. It is best to use a single hex socket on this, so a 6-pointer rather than a 12-pointer, because that can be done up very tight and is one of the very few things that the factory is sensible enough to use Loctite on. It is, as you can see, quite a long bolt. Make sure you don't drop the flinger plate down the cam chain tunnel. You can now pry the sprocket off the end of the camshaft. I'm just leaving it there for a moment because, being a dill, I forgot to bring any cable ties over with me, so I have to go wandering off grumbling to myself to get some cable ties. Come on, you silly old fart. Ah, there he is. Bit fiddly. All you've got to do is get it through the mounting hole in the sprocket, grab hold of him and zip tie him to the side of the head. Try and keep a bit of tension on the cam chain, that way you won't lose the timing on the chain. Now these next two bolts are the ones that clamp the back of the cam chain tunnel on the cylinder head. It's important to loosen them off first, because your next thing you're going to do is to loosen off the four main bolts, nuts that hold the the cam box on, and if you don't loosen those two first, you will find that the head may warp and cause problems later because it's held down on only one corner. That strange little pokey out thing that I'm on the nut I'm just undoing, that is actually an earthing tang for the head, so that if the HT lead starts shorting to the rocker cover, rather than the because the rocker cover is isolated by a neoprene gasket and an O-ring around the plug tube tunnel, the only place that it will try and earth to is through your knee, which isn't particularly exciting. But they have this little tang that presses against the inside of the rocker cover, and it can earth through there rather than giving you a nasty shock in a corner. Now we've got those off, let's just pick up the cam box. Watch out for the oil pouring out the back of it. Yes, that's right, you idiot. And we take it away from the bike. Just dump it in the parts washer to drain for a moment. A few other bits of munty old 8 valve in there. Right, over to the bench and undo the 4 bolts that hold the weir onto the bottom of the cam box. $6mm Allen bolts, just the 4 of them. You don't have to be too gentle with any of this. The only bits that you're going to use it again after you rollerize are the rockers. The entire cam box's cams are replaced. There, look, there's a few old flat tappets. Oh, look, there's a few camshafts as well. You can see I've done a few of them. Over 200 now. Yeah, you've got to take the weir off. Come on, you dummy, you've gone and left the screwdriver over the other side of the workshop. Off he comes, take the camshaft out. There are your flat tappets, and look, what a surprise. The DLC's coming off them, and they all do that, sir. There's no exceptions. It's only a matter of how long it's going to take. Other side takes about the same amount of time, but you have to get the tank off, and it's slightly different with the cam chain tensioner. That's it. That's all there is.